Happy Thursday again. Welcome to the Healthy Indoors Live Show. I'm your host, Bob Krell. I'm founder and publisher of Healthy Indoors Magazine. And as always, it's great to have you here. Today's show is, we have a provocative title, is Mold in Buildings, Organized Crime. And I know it's a provocative title, but you'll see why we get into it with our guest Sharon Kramer, who will be joining us in a moment. So anyway, many of you are watching the show from our Healthy Indoors online global community platform, and that's great. Those of you who are watching it there, we archive all our shows. We live stream all our programs there, so it's a great place for you to be. The community, also as community members, we started this program for Ask Me Anything events. And this was, we launched these back in August. So every month, or at least monthly, we offer an opportunity to have an online discussion with an industry expert, subject matter expert that we bring on, and we actually live stream it with a Zoom call into our platform. So you as a community member have the opportunity to even engage with these experts. Our last one in September was with Jeff May, who is a well-known and long-established indoor air environmental consultant and author in the industry. Dr. David Krause will be doing our October one. In order to get that, you need to be a member of the community. So if you'd like to know more about that, go to healthyindoors.global. That'll get you to the community information site and how you can register and become a member. So we certainly encourage that. And again, many of you may be watching this show in other places. We stream it live to Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn. There's a bunch of other places. This is our link, though, for this particular show. It's global.healthyindoors.com/Healthy Indoors Live Show. Yeah, you're not going to remember that, but that's okay. So we're going to be right back with our guest, Sharon Noonan Kramer, right after a word from our sponsor. So Sharon Noonan Kramer, is an advocate for integrity and environmental health, marketing, and honesty in courts. She's been just a champion of this aspect in the industry for so long, decades now. So I guess without further ado, let me bring in Sharon. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Quite well, actually. This topic's near and dear to me as well, too. Somehow, obviously, I've been an IAQ guy for a long time, going almost over 30 years now. But microbial issues in the indoor environment, water damaged buildings. This is not a new problem. This has been a problem in my entire career. I've been, dealing with it, and I think, you know. Let's for people who are not familiar with you, let's have you give a little history in the background. What got you here? Like what happened in your world that drove you into this topic and into being an advocate for trying to improve the situation?
Okay. Well, I have a degree in marketing, and in 2001, I had a leak in an ice maker line in a refrigerator, and our insurer sent us these people who had no clue what they were doing. They cross contaminated the whole house, and then they ruined it. We couldn't go home again, and I was getting sick. And in the process, I've always been treated like an honest person, respectable person. And then all of a sudden, when I was saying, I don't feel good, my house, you can't, oh, you're just somebody who's out to scam the insurance. So it was really devastating about, going through this horrible thing and being called a liar and a scammer at the same time. So our case settled with our homeowner insurer in 2003, and I was already treating with the late Dr. Marinkovich up in the Bay Area. And so by that time I was pretty much all better, but I couldn't walk away from the issue in good conscience because I knew there were a lot of like single mothers in low income housing and whose children were getting sick and they were being treated like dirt too. And so I'm an old salesman, is what I am. I've always been, my living is sales. But so I thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go to Washington, D.C., and I'll tell them there's a problem and they will fix it. I didn't understand politics at the time. And so that took me into a whole world that is, it's just very ugly and it's very insidious. And the problems that were created by allowing expert defense witnesses to set the standard of care of what constitutes evidence-based current accepted science, beginning in 2001, they are still plaguing this issue today. And it's people in moldy military housing, the kids in dorms, in the moldy dorms, low-income housing, they still are not being told that the water damaged buildings can cause disabling neurocognitive difficulties. And when they put it together on their own, they can't find anyone to help them because the doctors are being told, no, that's proven not to be. So, that's what I set out to shut down. It's been 18 years ago now. And I've taken some bites out of the crime over the years, but I haven't been able to completely eradicate it. But in some ways, the long haulers from COVID are helping because they're helping to establish that, these certain environmental exposures can cause disabling neurocognitive problems. So that makes it easier to be taken seriously on it. And I'm just an old canary in the coal mine, and I just keep chirping away, and I'm going to knock out that fraud that it's scientifically proven water damaged buildings don't cause neurocognitive difficulty.
Well,
I know I'll win. I'm just
yeah,
going
and
to keep
one of
doing
the
it.
problems, Sharon, is that in this industry now, as a professional and consultant in the industry, I go to conferences and I see my peers, other people in the industry, make comments like that too. And again, I can't always comment whether they are defense side expert witnesses. They might be they might be what they make their money from. But I think there's also this misinformation that, well, the science isn't proven, and it's like my argument is, like, even if the science wasn't proven, it certainly hasn't been disproven. Like, the claim that, it's just, that's not the case. So maybe it's not been thoroughly proven with enough peer-reviewed material. So my argument to that would be we need more research. And, we know from just historic data what's going on in just thousands and thousands and thousands of cases of people having issues, that there's a problem here. It's like maybe
Mm,
you don't know all the parameters, but that doesn't mean you disprove it. It means you need more research. You need to understand it better. I, anyway,
right.
it's a
And
challenge.
mhm.
Obviously, forces lined up against you early on in this. It's especially with that case that you were involved with, that it ultimately ended up you being tossed in jail for a short period too, with
Oh
some
yeah,
serious
the
threats.
California courts have been framing me for libel for one accurate sentence for 17 years because I dared to expose how this scam works. That it involves HHS, it involves expert defense witnesses, medical associations, think tanks, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. They all built this little marketing campaign based on this junk science risk assessment model as false proof that moldy buildings don't cause brain injuries. And, the discrimination has been horrible against people who have the brain injuries. But I'm kind of like the victim's victim because I spoke out to stop it, and I got harshly retaliated against. So, but I have Javier Becerra on video from 2017 pledging to investigate this organized crime when he was California Attorney General. Our
Mhm.
paths crossed, actually, because I was working the corruption in the court side of the issue at the time. But I don't think he even understood what he said he would do. So I'm in the process of contacting him again and reminding him, hey, you know that criminal investigation you said I could have. Well, you're helming the federal department where it started 20 years ago, and you need to make that end. So,
Yeah, I mean, and that's, so I mean, your thoughts and your claims are that it's a systemic issue. It's so this is something that goes far deeper than even just lobbyists and, I mean, or maybe not much deeper than lobbyists, because it's always follow the money trail. Um, it's not hard for me as a professional in the industry for 30 plus years to understand that there are vested interests that really don't want to exacerbate, if that's the word I dare use, the severity of mold exposure, right, in water damaged buildings, because they have constituents, whoever they represent, are on the hook for millions and billions of dollars of liability if that's the case. So I get it.
right,
I might get there's a lot of money, not wanting this to come out.
exactly. And that's what I never ask, like, the CDC or other places, hey, will you add this science into your policies? Because I'm not a scientist, I'm not a physician. That's not what I do. But what I think has made me such a target is because I do go to decision makers and I say, hey, this is scientific fraud. Can you get that out of your policies? So I don't try to get new research into policies. I just work to knock the junk science that's already in
Mhm.
there out. And um, in 2000, I'm getting pretty good at it sometimes too. In
Well, I
two,
mean, and that's the thing, in the pre-show we mentioned, how long you've been at this, and not because you're profiting from it. This is something that, this is you appear to have made this a life mission to actually try to uh, correct this.
well, I didn't mean to make it a life
Right.
mission. I just meant to go to DC and tell them there was a problem. And then apparently I got a little too close to the flame. So, um, then so, what I want to talk about is how it remains a scientific fraud in U.S. public health policies, physician education, insurer claims handling practices, and toxic torts, that it's scientifically proven moldy buildings do not cause brain injuries. So that's what I want it understood, that this is an organized crime. It began 21 years ago by weaponizing HHS for the insurance industry, followed by weaponizing the California courts to cover it up. And I want people to understand why they think it's proven moldy buildings do not cause brain injuries.
Yeah,
So is
and
that
again, yeah, what you're citing, the basis for that is science that doesn't really line up. And I, back when your case was active and stuff, in the industry, it was before I was involved with the Healthy Indoors publication.
uh-huh.
I followed it too, as just as a consultant. I was an IAQ consultant in the industry, and to me, that was just, I took heavy interest in what you were involved with and some of the specifics in your case. So it's like, and it's unfortunate because people have cited that as, as justification for not acting on these things in buildings.
Have cited what?
It
The
was cited
retaliation?
the junk science, what you're calling junk science, which I don't disagree with that, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate because you get, as a consultant working, 30 plus years, I've seen hundreds of cases of people that have been adversely affected by it, and also, seeing them line up with their medical doctors. Their medical providers don't believe what they're telling them, and it's heartbreaking
Yeah.
actually to watch it.
I mean, to me, it's just disgusting. These guys have been making money as expert defense witnesses for 20 years, claiming they've proven moldy buildings do not cause brain injuries. How many cases have they profited from where the person is experiencing brain injuries and they're profiting by using junk science to claim it's not proven? And that's bad enough. But what they also did is they bastardized the policies to support their lying. And so what that causes is when people are sick, they can't get help from doctors who think they're lying. Um, so can I just give you a quick rundown of how the fraud came to be and how it remains that way? Because
Sure,
that's what I
absolutely.
want
Yeah,
people to
I'd
know.
love to hear that.
Okay. So in 2000, Melinda Ballard, the late Melinda Ballard, went on CBS, The Insidious Mold, and she told the truth nationally about her husband having disabling brain injury from their moldy mansion in Texas. And she and her child were coughing up blood, pulmonary hemorrhaging. And
Mhm.
so it started getting out there on a national level. And then in June 2001, Melinda got a $32 million plaintiff verdict in a mold trial. I mean, the verdict didn't have anything to do with if it was proven the buildings caused the illnesses or not, but it was for bad faith, ensure bad faith and
Right.
punitive damages. And so, and then it got reduced way down too. But anyhow, because people were becoming aware that, yeah, these buildings really can't cause these serious illnesses, in that large jury verdict, the insurance industry just went, yeah, we don't want to be responsible for all this. So they ran to their legislators, and it was under the George Bush Jr. administration that this stuff started. Veteran environmental policy writers from CDC NIOSH, like Brian Harden and um, Elena Page was there. There was a conference in DC on May 13th and 14th that Ron Gotts sponsored. And, there were a lot of the scientists from Big Tobacco were there, which was him, Lise Haley, Harriet Burge, um, Kelman, uh, and then there were those from CDC NIOSH, which I'm not sure if they were actually there or their papers were presented,
Okay.
but it was Hardin, Elena Page, Doug Trout, a couple others. And that is when it was just like a takeover of science in policies. And so then in October of 2002, the American College of Occupational and Environmental Medicine came out with this so-called evidence-based position statement. But when you look at it, it was written by expert defense witnesses, Hardin, Kelman, and Andy Saxon of UCLA. And I mean, they just promoted this just utter nonsense as false proof that moldy buildings do not cause these injuries. Hardin and Kelman had concocted this toxicological risk model. I call it the Veritox theory. And all they did, they took a study of Dr. Carol Rouse, where she had blasted mold into the trachea of rats.
Mhm.
And then they added extrapolations and hypotheticals to it. And they falsely professed to prove that current scientific evidence does not support the proposition inhaled mycotoxins in homeschooler, it hurt anyone. But you can't do that. You can't take a rat study of mold blasted in trachea of rats, add some bells and whistles, and falsely profess to prove that all these people who are being exposed, chronically and at low doses and to multiple biocontaminants and all routes of exposure, dermal inhalation, ingestion. You can't do that. That's not science. To use that piece of shit and claim that that proves all these people with brain injuries are lying. So that was in 2002. In 2003, the U.S. Chamber of Commerce paid Hardin and Kelman to author a position statement. Actually, the check came from the Manhattan Institute think tank. And now that little piece of garbage, the Veritox theory, was marketed to the building science or building real estate, insurance industries that it was scientifically proven toxic mold all these claims about toxic mold are just because of trial lawyers and media hype.
And
So that,
the basis for that was really all in this one study, right? This one limited,
yeah, it's not
very
even a
limited
study.
focus. Yeah. Okay.
It's not even a study. Carol Rao did a study of mold being blasted into the trachea. That was a mechanistic study.
Sure.
The problem is the extrapolations of Hardin and Kelman and what they falsely professed they had proven far more than you ever can with that. And from that, this whole empire has been built that it's proven moldy buildings do not cause brain injuries. Um, so then it went to the American Academy of Allergy and Immunology in 2005. Andy Saxon authored that paper with some other guys. I forget who all it is. Jay Portnoy. Jay didn't actually author it. But anyhow, they have in their paper, and thus we agree with the ACOM mold statement. So basically, you have that little spin in the Quad AI paper that refers to the ACOM statement. And from that, that's how it got parroted to the immunologist that has proven moldy buildings do not cause brain injuries. And then the American College of Medical Toxicology put out their mold position statement, and it was authored by Daniel Sudekin and Thomas Kurt. They're expert defense witnesses in mold litigation too. And they cited to the Quad AI statement, the ACOM statement, and they spun a paper that was about brain injuries from mold, olfactory. I forget that. Anyhow, they misquoted that one and they used that as false proof. See, this proves moldy buildings do not cause brain injuries. What's so bad about ACMT is that HHS funds them through the Agency of Toxic Substance Disease Registry to disseminate information to physicians. So, I mean, it's a direct link from HHS to promoting junk science through these medical associations to teaching the doctors that the buildings don't cause brain injuries to then using it in court to lie as expert defense witnesses when helping their clients avoid liability for causation, disability, and death. So I've been able to knock it down a bit with help of honest policy influencers over the years, like Mike Hudson from OSHA stayed on ACOM to sunset their mold position statement for a long time. And so it's been sunset, but they still promote it and as science, and it's still on the NIH PubMed, and
So it's still being cited, obviously.
it's still being cited.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I read these depositions. These guys are getting sneakier. They don't cite to their own work in the ACOM paper. What they do is they cite to the Quad AI paper. Yes, and it's proven Quad AI says moldy buildings don't cause brain injuries, but when you look at it, it's because they're citing to their work. In 2019, I got contacted by some military mothers who were like, the Navy and Marine Corps Public Health Center had put out a new guidance for clinicians, and it was that false concept was in there, that it's proven moldy buildings don't cause brain injuries. You know, I'm speaking in plain language. I'm not quoting exact quotes here.
Sure.
But anyhow, I could see, okay, so they're just parodying, they're using Quad AI to get to the ACOM nonsense. And they were very gracious. I just contacted them at the Navy Marine Corps Public Health Center, and just in a couple of emails, I was able to show, hey, you guys are teaching the military doctors with debunked scientific fraud, and they took it out. So, I don't know what they ultimately ended up with in there, but they did take out promoting the false concept that it's proven moldy buildings don't cause brain injuries. So it's been a long haul because California courts have been used since 2005 to try to make me look like a malicious liar about HS getting corrupted beginning in late 2001, early 2002. And I just keep chipping away. I always am looking over my shoulder because I know I'm probably going to get retaliated against. Like this, who knows what's going to happen to me for this complaint? I'll probably get. They always do it through a collateral attack.
I mean, but here you are 21 years into this, and
Hmm.
obviously, you know, you're doing, you don't gain anything by being here doing, even being on this show saying this. There's no personal gain for you. If anything, you put yourself in jeopardy. So, um,
Well,
so
I would like to stop being deemed a malicious liar. That would
yeah,
be that would
well,
be a personal gain for me.
well, yeah, that's always a plus. But yeah, so here we are, and you mentioned earlier, not post pandemic, but we're on, the waning part of at least. Yeah, I mean, I hate to say that because people are dying every day, so I don't want to say post pandemic because many people are still being affected. But we came off of a once in our lifetime, hopefully, global event that got everybody very focused on the indoor environment and potential exposures to things in the indoor environment, microbiological things, right? Viral, but still nonetheless, still thinking, breathing, inhalation, that sort of thing. So I think society wise, we're more attuned to indoor air quality and exposure issues. So how how do you, in your opinion, how does that frame up for maybe pushing this, trying to further push the narrative of that water damaged buildings really are causing health issues in people? Is that an easier message to get out to people now, since we've already dealt with, SARS-CoV-2, airborne pathogen?
Somewhat. I mean, I belong in a chat group with the long haulers, the COVID long haulers, and they have trouble too having their doctors acknowledge that their neurocognitive difficulties and a lot of things that are happening to them are caused by long COVID. But it's on a broader scale with the public, it's become more commonly accepted knowledge that, yeah, these environmental exposures can cause chronic neurological and immunological problems. But I don't really care what people understand or
Hmm.
know. I just want the decision makers to get the fraud out of their policies, which are used as false proof that things that are happening are not happening. So I'm not a scientist. I'm not going to advance the understanding of long COVID. I'm not going to research how the neurocognitive problems occur. Well, I have a degree in marketing. I can see when fraud is being marketed and how it's being used to impact decisions. And so that's what I want. I want HHS to stop marketing the junk science of the expert defense witnesses in mold litigation. And
Yeah, I mean, you're looking to level the playing field, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's the
that's all
bottom
I
line.
want.
Yeah, yeah. Which I mean, that to me, that seems like that's a reasonable position to take. Um, and that's part of the problem. There's there's always been a lot of information in this industry. Mold in my entire career now, 30 going on 37 years in the indoor environmental industry. Mold has always been this contentious topic. Mold and microbiological, but it always seems, it's the M word. Mold is a big one. And there's just part of what you talk about too is just truth in marketing. Companies that are involved providing consulting and remediation services and maybe products associated with that. There's been a lot of, I'll say at minimum puffery and at maximum flat out fraud, by many organizations.
Hmm.
And this, it just seems like this is like always been the black eye of the indoor environmental industry. Uh, so do you
Yeah.
see that changing?
Um, you know, I try to stay away from the IAQ guys most of the time because they just
So do
drive me
I.
crazy.
I don't like us very much, to be
Well,
honest.
they drive me crazy because they're so technical and they they have to know how many angels dance on the head of a pin before they'll. It's so. I mean, it's not that I don't like the IAQ guys. It's just that they drive me crazy. So So I try to stay away from them as much as possible.
Well, I'll do my best to not be that type of IQ guy. And honestly, I concur with you because there's a certain aspect of the higher educated people on the IQ side, the consulting side. Some of the tend to want to be overtly technical, throw acronyms at you, ad nauseum to the point where it's ridiculous, and they can't, in lay person's terms, explain a situation to somebody and communicate readily. That's a big issue. That's always been an issue in this industry. But I think from a marketing standpoint, I think many organizations use that terminology to actually, you know, foster almost scare tactics and be able to just scare people with, scaring people with terminology and, and that's unfortunate. I've always
Yeah,
tried to be the voice of reason my whole time in the industry. Um, but so, to that point, um, here we are. This is a problem that hasn't gone away. You got involved in this 20 plus years ago, but here we are today, and we still have water damaged buildings, and we still have microbiological stuff, in the buildings that's causing, health impacts on people. And has it gotten better? Has it gotten worse? What do you think?
um, I I think it's actually gotten worse in a lot of ways because what happened. I mean, the the guys that came into this issue from the big tobacco, issue, they should have been called on the carpet for what they did in that issue, but they weren't, and that's how they've been able to thrive and influence corrupt policies in other environmental exposure areas, and so they can use it to lie in court. So it's not. It goes beyond the mold issue here. Defending science and Union of Concerned Scientists, and they work really hard to keep these guys' fingers out of the federal policy influencing pies and keep them off of committees. And I support those organizations. And so what they're doing in the mold issue is the same thing that was done in the tobacco issue, and they do it in other issues too. And they've gotten more influential over the years because, if you're allowed to get away with something for so long, there's some politicians out there who've probably been helping you. And it's gotten more insidious as far as advancing the understanding of causation and cures for environmental injuries, if that makes sense. It's across the board. They just, and from what I see, it's gotten worse.
Well, and you know what, and to the point where you said, multiple constituents as far as environmental hazards, right? Asbestos. We still have yet to ban asbestos in the United States.
Mm-hmm.
We've spent literally probably trillions of dollars, at least, hundreds of billions of dollars on asbestos abatement over the years, and all the money spent with the HERO programs at schools. And here we are, we're still importing asbestos, contained products into the United States. I mean, yeah, have
Yeah.
we slowed the amount of it being used? Certainly, but it's still, I think most consumers don't realize how much asbestos is still out there. And again, so this tactic but you did mention in the pre-show the big tobacco's tactic was to try to push blame for indoor environmental issues to other aspects, because I know, like, back when I was first coming up in the industry, big tobacco was funding most of the IAQ research as long as you didn't talk about indoor environmental tobacco smoke. As long as you
Yeah.
researched everything else, fiberglass,
Right.
everything else was on the table. Chemicals, sure, absolutely, research all that. Couldn't have any ETS findings in there. Uh, but I mean, this is a little different than that, right? Because it's not really there. Is the blame being shifted to somebody? I mean, is the tactic is just flat out denying that it even occurs, right? Is that?
Well, with the big tobacco, and I told you I've read the UCSF Tobacco Legacy Library. I'm such a geek, probably more than most people have.
It
And
happens.
and they, primarily what they did in the tobacco industry was they they found alternative probable causation of illness to cast doubt on the tobacco smoke. So they were that's maybe not quite ethical, but it's also not criminal. What all they did, they were selling doubt of causation for their
Hmm.
clients. That's what they do for a living. But in the mold issue, it's a little different because they crossed the line and they used HHS to do it. They, instead of just saying you can't prove that moldy buildings cause brain injuries, they created scientific fraud and said we can use this as false proof that moldy buildings do not cause
Right.
brain injuries. So that's where the criminality is.
And that's a big
It's,
difference.
it is.
There is a big difference between those two scenarios.
Right. It's
Yeah.
one, it's, one is, what do they call it? Selling absence of evidence, but the other is selling evidence of absence when it's not real
Hmm.
evidence of absence. It's fraud. So I know I'm probably going to get, I am probably going to get severely retaliated against for this, but
You
I'm
know,
not shutting up.
well, yeah, and it's funny. Susan Valenti, our editor from Healthy Indoors, referred to you as the Rodney Dangerfield of mold. Yeah, it's like it's like no, because I mean, You've taken a lot of heat from industry people over the years too. So I have no doubt that at times you don't think kindly of the indoor environmental, like our industry, because our industry hasn't really embraced your message a lot, or at least many members of it. And I guess you could argue that many of those, consulting members probably work on the defense side because there's a lot deeper
Well,
pockets over there. Um,
yeah, I think that's a lot of it, but I think a lot of it too is, how you get caught up in mob mentality,
sure.
and I think a lot of those guys just assumed I was an idiot and a liar, and they they get in and kind of gang up with it, and that's why they were so ugly. But some of them, I think, just don't like me. I don't really care. I'm not shutting up.
Well, there's also, I mean, let's face it, I mean, it's changing, but there was and still is to some extent a major white male bias in our industry. And as far as the professional side, I mean, that is changing, but 20 years ago, I mean, come on,
Oh yeah,
yeah,
yeah, it was awful, and
yeah.
it's still. I'm amazed at how some people, like in the chronic fatigue, the MECFS issue, how they've hung in there. I mean, like 30 years longer,
Mhm.
trying to get it recognized that water damaged buildings is typically a causative factor for those symptoms too. And it's just, I was on an NIH webinar a couple of weeks ago, and one of them asked, "How come you're not researching water damaged buildings as the cause of CFSME?" And the researcher said, "Oh, that's just like there's too much in it. It's too complex. And besides, the toxicologists say blah blah blah." I'm like, oh god.
Back to that. But water damage, I mean, if you think about it, many, I mean, and again, I've personally had the opportunity to do thousands of investigations in my 30 years. And and I know this from colleagues, just being involved in the industry for this length of time. A good portion, and I'm not going to say all, but a good portion of the buildings that we're called into to investigate, suspected indoor environmental issues, indoor air quality problems, um, a good portion of that tracks back to water, previous water damage or current water damage issues in the building. Not always. I mean, sometimes it's
Right.
strictly chemical issues or ventilation issues, but usually a building that's problematic and people are experiencing problems, there's a history of water damage in that building. It's almost, pretty high
That's
likelihood.
interesting.
Pretty high likelihood, at least from my experience. And again, I'm speaking, to what I know.
So you're
Um,
saying even if it's like you get called out because a building has a chemical problem, when you look at the history, it looks like there might have been a
because it just
water
seems they're
damage
problematic
problem.
because they're problematic buildings. That's the thing. I think I mean, sometimes it's a single constituent that's causing an issue, and that's more cut and dry, and it's easier to identify, and you find it. But a lot of times, I do believe there's like a mix. It's like a soup, right? What we're being
Hmm.
exposed to is some of this, some of this, some of this, and often buildings that people are having, health complaints in, there's an underlying water damage issue too, maybe in addition to other causations. It's not
Yeah,
uncommon. It's not uncommon.
right.
Well, most buildings, think about it too, Sharon. In the history, or in the life of almost any building, there's going to be a water event or water events. That's just plumbing breaks, floods happen. That's not that uncommon.
Uh-huh. Right.
How many buildings are you going to find that haven't had a water event if they've been around a while?
I think I mean, you're seeing a lot of dorms now, it seems like, where the kids are complaining from colleges all over that they're having health issues. And I don't know I mean, is that because of flooding? But it's usually in the ventilation system. Is that because of poor maintenance, or is that because of flooding? I don't understand
Yes, yeah,
why
all
that
of it.
seems to be more prevalent.
Well,
Because,
all of it. Think about it. Most dorms, especially like with state universities. I mean, they're well, it's almost all university, but low bidder builds the facility. A lot of the building stock, the student housing, and a lot of these facilities is pretty old, built in the 60s and 70s. There was a lot of infrastructure built up in during those periods. They weren't designed that well. So
mhm.
building envelope issues. They're leaky. They've got a lot of inherent design issues, and then they haven't been maintained all that well. So the likelihood of moisture issues in those buildings is pretty high. It's not uncommon. You know, so I
But
mean, it
I
stands to
guess
reason. Yeah.
what I'm trying to understand is in this a long time, and there have been dorms over the years that have been problematic and all, but I'm seeing that there seems to be a lot more of them occurring now. And, is something
Oh, freezing up a little, or one of us is freezing here. Ah, the joys of internet. Stay with us, Sharon. We'll hopefully have you back here in a sec. Yeah, we're experiencing a little bit of a feed issue with Sharon. Let's see if we can resolve this quickly in real time. Sharon, you there? Ah. Well, so we are having a technical difficulty, and of course, that's unfortunately something that live events are subject to. So we're hoping to be able to get Sharon back on the line here to continue this discussion. Um, but in any event, um, I think this is something I'd love to see some commentary in our chat on the Healthy Indoors online community. If you're watching the show, give us some commentary. Or if you're watching this after the event, if you're a member of the community, you can go into the comment thread underneath. If you're not, by all means, send us an email. We would welcome some input from you to global excuse me, yeah, global at healthyindoors.com is the email address that you could reach out to us at, um, and be able to comment on this. So it's an important issue, regardless of where we're at with this. I mean, obviously Sharon's been involved a long time. I've followed her story for 20 plus years now, and as a consultant in this industry myself, had the opportunity to see just numerous events with water damaged buildings and problems happening. And one of the things that I've always felt, and I think needs to be stressed more, is that mold. The microbial issues in buildings. We got Sharon back. Mold is a symptom. Mold is not really. It's the problem is a moisture problem in buildings. So Sharon, we got you back. Great. I was
right,
doing my
I'm here.
I was doing my tap dance to cover. But live shows. That's like this is makes it interesting. So as you were saying, I don't know if you remember where you were at here.
I don't know where I was at, but the main thing that bothers me is if the physicians were taught that these buildings really do cause these types of illnesses, then people would know to get out before the symptoms become disabling, and the physicians would know how to treat them. But not only that, landlords would know that my negligence is causing this person to become extremely ill. And, maybe that doesn't matter to the big military housing landlords, but it does matter to little individual landlords who have they're not out there to kill their tenants.
No, no, I don't
They
think most
don't
people are not
know.
malicious. Honestly,
No,
it's lack of knowledge or misinformation or misunderstanding
right.
is big a bigger issue. I agree.
Right. And so if this little fraud would just go away, as that's used as false proof that the moldy buildings don't cause these disabling neurocognitive and inflammatory health issues. If HHS could just like take an eraser and take everywhere where they have that in their policy and just get rid of it, it would help a lot to cause the science to be able to move forward more freely, and physicians and everybody to be educated, and
Hmm.
in the long run it would save insurers money
Well,
if everybody
yeah,
knew what they were doing.
yeah, and the problem is having claims like that. It tends to, right, like it stops any further investigation. You say this is the way it is. It's like
Right.
this is decided. We've decided this already. So on Tuesday, the White House had actually the first I've ever seen an entire day devoted to indoor air quality. Right, coming from the White House, live streamed event. We attended that, and it's funny talking about a lot of the stuff that's going to happen, perhaps with the Inflation Reduction Act, but also with the Clean Air and Buildings Challenge. That the White House announced earlier this year. And one of the things that in pre-show, and Susan, you and I were discussing this, uh, what was suspiciously absent, and it has been in all the communications, any discussions of microbiological.
Oh,
It's been everything's very ventilation based, maybe talking about chemicals, chemicals and products, off gassing, sure, a little bit, but the solutions that are being offered all seem to be going down that mechanical path, the HVAC path, and that's not going to deal anything with a water damaged building. It's not going to
no,
address that.
it's the same thing. I attended the Surgeon General's workshop in January of 2005 on indoor air quality, and it was the same thing. They they know that buildings are making people sick, but they talk about how to clean up the buildings without addressing the elephant in the room, that people are getting sick. So it's been that way since forever. It's like, yeah, we need to clean up these buildings, but we don't want to cause anybody liability for making people sick by acknowledging that people are so sick.
Well,
It's
I
been
mean,
that
but
way
think about
forever.
it though. But the way our political, I mean, if you talk to the United States, the way our political systems work currently, there's a lot of money in politics, and there's a lot of private interest money in politics, and a lot of people are beholden to a lot of other people, and I don't know how we, effectively move this forward. Right? Because it's very hard. Anything that's going to cost people with money, they don't really care to have done. You know, and
Yeah, it's just
Is there a
it's
path forward? Is there a path forward to actually getting uh, some sort of real change? Real positive action here.
Well, I mean, I don't think you can do it with government in general, but I think there's a lot of private sector physicians that are getting more aware, but it's hard. It's not going to come from HHS very easily. I don't know if I said this while the camera is rolling or not, but in 2017, my path crossed with Javier Becerra. He's the secretary of HHS now,
Mhm.
and I was working the court corruption side of the issue at the time, the slap fixing to frame me, and I asked him if I could have a criminal investigation of the slap fixing, and I don't think he really even understood exactly what I was asking him, because he said, if Mrs. Kramer has some matter she would like to bring to the attention of my office, the Department of Justice, we'll certainly consider that. We always will. So anyway, I'm um, I'm 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 trying to gingerly figure out how to address Secretary Becerra and tell him, hey, you know that corruption problem you said I could have an investigation of? Well, now you're heading the federal department where that crime began. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess it's the nuance here is, how you get through the door and actually. I mean, the thing is, I believe not. I don't think every politician is totally owned and unable to actually do positive change. I think many people in office actually are there for good reasons and
Yeah, I
wanting to
do
be
too.
able to, serve the public and stuff. So I didn't mean to like categorize every politician as corrupt and being bought off by big business, 'cause I don't feel that way. But I think the system in general makes it hard for people to do the right thing.
Right. And then something like this, it's hard for people to grasp, even politicians, decision makers. How do you go to extrapolations added to data from one rat study to just, I mean, it's trillions in fraud by now, medical legal fraud, because it's
Right,
impacted.
because that's compounded. I mean, that thing's been
Yeah,
cited and cited and cited, and that see, but the problem is to expect an elected official to have subject matter expertise so they can, even understand a lot of these topics. That's what happens. Like even the mold licensing in states. I can speak to New York. Licensing in New
hmm,
York. I think the legislators, when they pushed that through in 2015 and got it signed, had all good intent. It was post Hurricane Sandy. They were trying to get rid of the fraud, help the consumers, but they pushed through legislation that they didn't really understand the impact of it or how to really even craft it. And
exactly.
that's the other problem. So a lot of times it's not even ill intent; it's good intent, but they screw it up.
Right. So that's what, um, I'm probably going to get killed for this. Just
Oh, I hope not.
kidding, kind of. But, I have
We
the,
might might both get wiped out over this. Who
yeah,
knows?
but, I have a White House cabinet member who's helming HHS on video pledging to investigate what I mean, I'm just calling it what it is.
Mhm.
It's an organized crime with misuse of government assets that furthers it. And so I'm going to do my best to get him to honor that pledge. I don't think he had a clue what I was telling him when I first told him. But, if he's going to be in charge of HHS, he really needs to understand what I told him and what he's already pledged to do. So
So
we'll
so
see.
we're almost out of time, but looking forward. So Sharon, so I mean, you've been fighting this battle for 21 years.
Uh-huh.
Anything new on the horizon that you're going to be doing, or is like,
I
or
have
anything you
some
can
things
share with
I'm
us, or
working on, but I don't really want to talk about them right now. But
okay,
I'm 66 years old now, and I have like two little twin grandbabies, and I like to go do things. So I'm kind of like I don't spend as much time on this issue as I used to. Um, I'm lucky to be able to go off and play with my family, so my husband and all. So
sure. Sure, understood. And again, this isn't your job. I mean,
no.
this is something. It's like your crusade, basically. Which is, for lack of a better term. Um,
Well, it's
and
because they forced me to stay in the issue
I,
because they framed me for libel. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a pretty serious thing. I mean, suddenly your position became criminal charges, which is like crazy.
oh, it wasn't even. It was really dirty. They put me in jail for civil contempt of court, which isn't a crime, and somehow the computer changed to give me a false criminal FBI record. I mean, come on. And then it took 6 months before the sheriff department would remove that false criminal FBI record. So, I never meant to be like public enemy number one in my government or anything. I've just been trying to tell the truth for 21 years.
Well, you
So,
ruffled feathers
oh yeah,
severely.
yeah. Well, and I think a lot of it, maybe I could be I could not speak so directly, and maybe that would help some. Maybe I ruffle feathers because I'm a bitch. But, that's just the way I speak and that's the way I communicate, and I'm just doing the best I can. So,
Nuanced discussion has never been one of my fortes either. So I get that. And here's the thing, I, I, kudos to you for at least standing up for literally decades. Uh, you know, trying to at least bring this to light, because without in the absence of that, if somebody doesn't do that, then it doesn't come to light,
right.
and it just the problem keeps going forward. And the other problem is, the way I would say it is the longer that something's considered acceptable, the harder it's going to ever be to change it.
Right.
So,
And that's what it just breaks my heart sometimes. If the court hadn't been framing me for libel since 2005, I mean, at that point when they first started, this scam was less than 3 years old. And, if they had acknowledged that was a slap suit right from the beginning, I don't know how many lives would have been changed and the
yeah,
fraud would not have gone farther. But
yeah. But here we are.
yeah,
Here we
but
are.
anyway,
So,
so, that's mainly what I want it to be known, that HHS is used to commit insurer fraud in the mold issue with false proof that moldy buildings are not causing disabling neurocognitive damages. And that's not going to change until somebody at HHS makes it change.
I guess we make that your closing statement.
Yeah.
It sounds like one. So Sharon Kramer, absolutely a pleasure to have you on the show. We've never actually had a chance. I mean, we're virtually meeting. We haven't met in person before, but I've followed you over the years, and thank you for joining us today in the show. Certainly want to hear what's going on with your future initiatives in this area, and as the story changes or as new stuff comes to light, we'd love to bring you back and share it and discuss this further.
Okay. Well, thank you, Bob. Thanks for having me on, because I think the time is right to get this information out there about the fraud in the mold issue. And I think timing's right to bring it to an end. So I appreciate you letting me come on.
Our pleasure. So, yeah, so that's all our time for this week. It goes so fast, especially when we have a short downtime with internet problems. This,
Yeah.
in all honesty, Sharon, this is one of the first times we've actually lost a guest and to bring them back on. So, for 2 years, I don't feel bad live streaming that many, hundreds and hundreds of hours. You're gonna have a few glitches. That makes sense. Um,
It's me. Every once in a while, I lose my internet connection. I don't even know why that is.
I don't even. I hate to say it, but our studios here in Syracuse, we have issues too, and we have like super fast business, high speed broadband. Yeah, sometimes.
Hmm.
Anyway, so we'll be back next week, same time. So on the 20th, we have Bill Spohn, and we may have another guest with him again, continuing our conversation from last week on some of the stuff going on with the HVAC aspects of the federal initiatives, the Clean Air and Buildings challenge, as well as the Inflation Reduction Act, and how that may affect the industry. So we're gonna take a little bit different angle on that and look at how that might be affecting our industry going forward. Again, if you're not part of the Healthy Indoors online global community, you should check it out. Global.healthyindoors.com is the site for that. So it can get you there. Even if you're not a member, you can see a lot of the public access, like our shows and a lot of the publications. And of course, you can become a member, by actually becoming a member. And to do that, you go to the healthyindoors.global site, which is a nice little landing page that gets you there and gives you the opportunity to sign up and become a member of the organization or the platform, which is a lot more than just our Healthy Indoors stuff, but an opportunity to network with other individuals and professionals from around the planet. So great shows coming up. Again, special thanks to Sharon for taking the time out of her day to be here with us this week. We greatly appreciate that. We'll be back again 1 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time next week for the Healthy Indoors show. Until that time, I'm Bob Krell. Stay healthy.